He thought I was just a pretty face. He thought I'd sit quietly, endure his condescension, and sign whatever papers they slid across my desk. But when an entire corporation bet their future on what I created, when they built their empire on the foundation of my genius, I decided to bet his entire career on his own arrogance. They never saw it coming. The moment they called me decorative was the moment I began planning their destruction. And when the whole world watched their grand unveiling collapse into chaos at 9:03 a.m., they finally understood that this pretty face owned the very brain that powered their dreams. My name is Jenna Brooks, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the chief AI engineer at Echelon Dynamics, 32 years old, MIT graduate, holder of 6 critical patents that nobody in the C-suite bothered to read the fine print on. That oversight would cost them everything. The morning it all started, I was in my corner office reviewing the neural network optimization reports when Tyler Cole walked in. No knock, no appointment, just the supreme confidence of someone who'd never earned anything in his life. Son of our new CEO, Charles Cole. Tyler had been installed as Executive Vice President of Innovation just 48 hours earlier. His resume was a masterclass in failing upward, 3 failed startups, 2 bankruptcies, and a trust fund that kept him afloat through it all. "So you're the famous Jenna," he said, helping himself to the chair across from my desk. His eyes did that thing I'd seen 1,000 times before, scanning me like he was pricing merchandise. "Dad says you're the genius behind our AI platform." "I designed and built the Neurosphere engine from scratch," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "It's the core architecture running everything from our predictive analytics to our entire cloud infrastructure." He leaned back, that practiced smile spreading across his face. "Well, we're going to need to make some changes, bring in some real talent. You know, people who understand the business side, not just..." He gestured vaguely at me. "The pretty face stuff." The pretty face stuff. There it was. "I have 2 master's degrees and 6 patents," I said quietly. Sure. Tyler waved dismissively. "Look, I'm not saying you haven't been useful, but going forward, we need people who can present to investors, who look the part in boardrooms. You understand, right? You'll still have a role. Of course, we'll need someone to explain the technical details to the real team." The real team, as if the 200,000 lines of code I'd written were just preliminary sketches, as if the algorithms that had secured $3 billion in contracts were just happy accidents from someone playing dress-up in tech. "I see," I said, my fingers finding the small USB drive in my pocket, the one containing every piece of documentation proving my sole ownership of those 6 patents. "And this real team, when do they start?" "Monday. I've already brought in some consultants from Boston. McKenna Group, heard of them?" They were corporate vultures who specialized in liberating intellectual property from companies through legal maneuvering, the kind of firm you brought in when you wanted to steal something but needed it to look legitimate. "They'll need full access to the codebase," Tyler continued, already typing on his phone. "I'll need you to prepare a complete handover document, every function, every algorithm, every line documented. Can you handle that? Or should I assign someone to help you?" The condescension dripped from every word. In his mind, I was already defeated, already accepting my diminished role. Just another pretty face who'd gotten lucky, now ready to step aside for the real players. "I'll take care of it," I said, standing up. "Everything will be documented." He looked pleased with himself, mistaking my compliance for submission. "Good girl. I knew you'd be reasonable. Oh, and Jenna maybe toned down the whole, 'I built this' narrative. It's a team effort, right? No one person creates anything here." As he left my office, I pulled out my personal laptop and opened the folder labeled Insurance. Inside were the original development logs, the patent filings in my name alone, the contracts Echelon had signed acknowledging my personal ownership of the Neurosphere IP. They'd licensed it from me, never purchased it outright. A detail buried in subsection 12 of my employment agreement that their lawyers had somehow missed. Tyler Cole thought I was just a pretty face. He was about to learn that this face had been smart enough to protect what was mine from the very beginning. The secret I'd been guarding for 3 years sat in a safety deposit box at First National, along with copies stored with my attorney. Marcus Reed. 6 patents, all filed independently before I joined Echelon Dynamics. The Neurosphere engine wasn't just something I'd built for the company, it was mine, licensed to them under terms they'd clearly never fully understood. I discovered this leverage by accident during my second week of Tyler's new regime. I'd been documenting the system architecture as requested when Sarah Martinez from legal stopped by my office at 7:30 p.m., looking frazzled. "Jenna, quick question," she said, glancing nervously down the hallway. "Tyler's asking about the IP transfer documents for Neurosphere. I can't find any record of the patents being assigned to Echelon. Do you have copies?" My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. "The patents were never transferred. Sarah, check Section 12 of my employment contract. Echelon licenses the technology from me." Her face went pale. "That can't be right. The entire Atlas project is built on Neurosphere. Our IPO filing specifically lists it as proprietary technology." "Proprietary to me," I clarified. "The company has an exclusive license to use it, renewable annually. The renewal date is actually coming up next month." Sarah left my office looking like she'd seen a ghost. 20 minutes later, my computer dinged with a forwarded email chain that she probably shouldn't have sent me. The subject line read, "Urgent Neurosphere IP status." Tyler's response at the top was telling, "This is unacceptable. Find a workaround. She doesn't need to know we know." So they were planning something. The workaround became clear over the next few days as I watched the McKenna Group consultants practically move into our offices. They were reverse engineering my code, trying to create something similar enough to replace Neurosphere but different enough to avoid patent infringement. The problem was, they didn't understand the underlying mathematical principles I'd developed. They were copying the what without grasping the why. I started my own documentation process, but not the kind Tyler expected. Every evening, I recorded videos of myself explaining the true architecture, the parts that weren't in any company documentation. I saved every email, every Slack message, every piece of evidence showing that the development happened on my personal equipment, on my own time, before Echelon even existed as a company. The leaked email chains kept coming, courtesy of Sarah, who seemed to have developed a conscience. One particularly damning thread showed Tyler discussing with his father. "Once we have the full documentation, we can pressure her to sign over the patents. If she refuses, we terminate her and claim she developed everything as work for hire. Either way, we win." Charles Cole's response was even more callous. "The pretty ones always fold under pressure. Offer her a generous severance if needed. $2 million should be enough to make this go away." $2 million. They thought they could buy my life's work for $2 million when it was generating 10 times that in revenue every quarter. I met with Marcus that Friday afternoon. He reviewed everything I'd compiled and smiled the way sharks do when they smell blood in the water. "They're attempting theft of intellectual property," he said simply, "but they're doing it badly. The evidence trail they're leaving is remarkable. When do you want to drop the hammer?" "Not yet," I told him. "They're planning something big with Atlas. Let them build their house on my foundation first." Marcus nodded. "The higher they climb, the harder they fall. But Jenna, once you pull that license, their entire system will collapse. You understand that, right? This won't just hurt Tyler. It could destroy the whole company." I thought about the 200 employees who had nothing to do with this, the ones who'd always treated me with respect. Then I thought about Tyler's smirk, his pretty face stuff comment, the systematic attempt to steal what I'd created. "They should have thought of that before they tried to steal from me," I said. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. The chess game began in earnest on a Tuesday morning when Tyler called an all-hands meeting for the engineering department. I sat in the back row, watching him parade around with his McKenna Group consultants like conquering heroes. "Innovation requires fresh perspectives," Tyler announced, his voice carrying that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having built anything real. "That's why we're restructuring how our AI division operates. The McKenna team will be conducting individual assessments to optimize our talent allocation." Talent allocation, corporate speak for deciding who to keep and who to throw overboard. The assessments were a joke. Brad McKenna himself interviewed me, spending 40 minutes asking about my communication style and leadership presence, while barely touching on anything technical. When I started explaining the mathematical foundations of the neurosphere engine, his eyes glazed over. "That's very impressive," he interrupted, "but what we're really interested in is scalability. Can your system handle enterprise-level deployment without you personally managing it?" "It already does," I replied. "The engine has been running autonomously for 18 months. But could someone else maintain it, improve it?" There it was. The real question, could they steal it and run it without me? With proper documentation, sure, I lied smoothly. That afternoon, I made my first real move. I quietly backed up everything. Not just the code, but the development environment. The custom compilers I'd written. The proprietary libraries that made Neurosphere actually work. Then I started my second backup protocol documenting every instance where the McKenna team accessed systems they shouldn't have permissions for. My colleague James Okafor pulled me aside after lunch. "They're trying to poach your team," he warned, offering them 50% salary increases to document your work and report directly to Tyler. "Who's taking the deal?" "Raj and Catherine already signed. David's considering it." The betrayal stung, but I understood. They had families, mortgages, futures to think about. Still, I made note of who stayed loyal. James, Sarah from legal, Monica from QA, and surprisingly, Tom from infrastructure, who'd never been particularly friendly but apparently had principles. Tyler escalated the next day. A formal transfer request appeared in my inbox. "Please provide complete administrative access to the following systems." The list included everything, even my personal development servers that I paid for myself. I complied partially, giving them access to the production systems, but conveniently forgetting about the development environments where the real magic happened. When pressed, I claimed technical difficulties and promised to resolve them soon. Meanwhile, the McKenna team grew increasingly frustrated. They had the code, but it wouldn't compile properly. They had the algorithms, but the outputs were gibberish. They didn't realize that Neurosphere required my custom compiler, built with proprietary optimization flags that weren't documented anywhere. I watched them struggle from my office, maintaining a helpful facade whenever they asked questions. "Oh, that error. Try adjusting the buffer allocation." Advice that sounded legitimate but led them further into the maze. Sarah stopped by my office late one evening, looking around nervously before closing the door. "They're drafting termination papers," she whispered. "Tyler wants you gone before the Atlas launch. They think they have enough to run Neurosphere without you." "When?" 2 weeks, right after you finish the documentation they requested. There's more." She hesitated. "They're also preparing a lawsuit claiming you violated your employment agreement by maintaining personal control over company property. They want to force you to sign over the patents." I smiled, actually smiled, which seemed to unnerve Sarah more than anger would have. "Thank you for telling me," I said calmly. "You might want to update your resume. Things are about to get interesting." That night, I sent Marcus a simple email, "Begin Phase 2. Phase 2 meant having him formally notify Echelon's legal department that the annual license renewal for Neurosphere was under review, and that any attempts to reverse engineer or circumvent the patented technology would result in immediate termination of the license agreement. The next morning, Charles Cole himself appeared in my office, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "What the hell is this?" He threw Marcus's letter on my desk. "Standard renewal notice," I replied innocently. "The license expires in 2 weeks. I'm sure we can work out terms for another year." His jaw clenched. "You're an employee of this company." "Yes, and the patents predate my employment. Would you like to see the filing dates?" The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Brooks." "I'm not playing anything, Mr. Cole. I'm protecting my intellectual property. Now, shall we discuss renewal terms?" The legal trap snapped shut on a Thursday afternoon when Echelon's general counsel, Richard Steinberg, arrived with a stack of papers thick enough to use as a weapon. Tyler flanked him, wearing that smirk I'd grown to despise. "Miss Brooks," Steinberg began, his tone professionally neutral, We've conducted a thorough review of your employment agreement and the development history of the Neurosphere engine. Our position is that all work products created during your employment belong to Echelon Dynamics. I leaned back in my chair, maintaining eye contact. Your position is wrong. We have documentation showing you used company resources. After I licensed the technology to you, I interrupted. The patents were filed 14 months before I joined Echelon. I have receipts for the personal equipment I used, timestamps from my home development environment, and Git commits showing the entire codebase was complete before my first day here. Marcus had prepared me for this moment. Every argument they'd make, we'd anticipated. Steinberg shifted tactics. The improvements made since joining are covered under the license agreement as derivative works, but the core technology remains mine. Section 12, subsection 4. Would you like me to pull up the exact language? Tyler's smirk faltered. You're being unreasonable. We're offering you $2 million for the patents. That's more than fair. The technology generated $40 million in revenue last quarter alone, I countered. Your definition of fair is interesting. Fine. Charles Cole's voice came from the doorway. He'd been listening. $5 million? Not for sale. $10 million. Mr. Cole, you're not understanding me. The patents aren't for sale. I'm happy to continue licensing them to Echelon under the current terms, with a modest adjustment for inflation. How modest? Steinberg asked. Triple the current rate. Tyler exploded. That's extortion. That's business, I replied calmly. You're free to develop your own AI engine. Oh wait, you've been trying that with McKenna Group for 3 weeks now. How's that working out? The silence told me everything. They'd hit wall after wall trying to replicate my work, without the custom compiler, without understanding the mathematical principles I'd developed during my PhD research. They were essentially trying to recreate Shakespeare by randomly typing letters. Charles Cole's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. If you don't sign over those patents, you're finished in this industry. I'll make sure you never work in tech again. I pulled out my phone and hit record, placing it visibly on the desk. Would you mind repeating that threat? Mr. Cole, my attorney would find it fascinating. He stormed out, Steinberg following. Tyler lingered. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. You planned this, he said quietly. From the moment I walked into your office, you knew what you were going to do. No, Tyler. From the moment you called me, just a pretty face, you planned this. You decided I was an obstacle to remove rather than talent to respect. Every step you've taken since has been towards stealing what I created. The Atlas launch is in 8 days, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. We've invited every major tech investor, the press, everyone. If the system fails, then you should have thought about that before trying to steal from me. That evening, I executed the final phase of my preparation. I created a kill switch in the license protocol, not malicious code, nothing that would damage their systems, simply a clean termination of access when the license expired. At 11:59 p.m. on the night before the Atlas launch, Neurosphere would stop responding to Echelon's servers. But I went one step further. I programmed it to display a simple message, license expired, please contact patent holder for renewal terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Monica in QA. They're running final tests for Atlas. Everything's green. They think they've won. I texted back, let them think that. The beautiful irony was that they'd built their entire presentation around showcasing Neurosphere's capabilities. Every demo, every feature they planned to highlight was dependent on my engine. They'd spent millions on marketing, flying in journalists from around the world, booking the largest tech venue in San Francisco. All of it balanced on technology they didn't own and couldn't replicate. Tyler made one last attempt the day before launch, approaching me in the parking garage as I headed to my car. Please, he said, all arrogance gone. You'll destroy the company. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs. You destroyed the company the moment you tried to steal from me, I replied. Those jobs were lost the second you and your father decided I was expendable. We can work something out. You had that chance, multiple chances. You chose this path. Tyler, now walk it. I drove home that night knowing that in less than 24 hours, The empire they'd built on my foundation would come crashing down. They'd gambled everything on the assumption that a pretty face couldn't possibly be smart enough to protect herself. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The countdown to destruction began 7 days before the Atlas launch. The entire Echelon building buzzed with nervous energy as teams worked around the clock, polishing presentations, running system checks, and preparing for what Tyler had boldly proclaimed would be the most revolutionary product launch in AI history. I maintained my routine, arriving at 8 a.m. sharp, sitting through meetings where they discussed my technology as if I weren't in the room. They'd stopped pretending to need my input, confident that the McKenna team had extracted enough knowledge to proceed without me. On Tuesday, 5 days before launch, James knocked on my office door, his face grave. "They're testing the backup systems," he said quietly, "running everything through parallel servers in case something goes wrong." "Are the backups using Neurosphere too?" "Everything is. They've built Atlas so deeply integrated with your engine that it's like..." He paused, searching for the right metaphor. "Like trying to run a human body without a heart. There's no component that doesn't rely on it." Perfect. That afternoon, I received an email from HR. "Dear Ms. Brooks, please attend a mandatory meeting regarding your transition planning on Friday at 2 p.m. Transition planning. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They planned to fire me the day before the launch, probably thinking it would prevent me from interfering. I forwarded the email to Marcus with a single line, "They're accelerating the timeline." His response was swift. "Cease and desist letters ready. Should I send them now?" "No, let them commit fully." Wednesday brought a surprise visit from Kevin Walsh, one of the senior investors who'd been with Echelon since the beginning. He closed my office door and spoke in hushed tones. "Jenna, I've heard concerning rumors. Is it true you own the patents to Neurosphere?" "Yes." He ran his hand through his silver hair. "And Charles is trying to force you out." "Tomorrow, actually, 2 p.m. transition meeting." "Christ." He sank into the chair. "Do you understand what's at stake here? We've pre-sold Atlas contracts worth $800 million. The IPO valuation is based entirely on this technology. Then perhaps someone should have verified the IP ownership before building an empire on it," I said evenly. "Can we make a deal I have influence with the board?" "The time for deals has passed. Kevin, they made their choice." He left looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. Thursday arrived with an almost festive atmosphere. Banner displays promoting Atlas lined the lobby. Camera crews were setting up for tomorrow's live stream. Tyler walked the floors like a conquering hero, shaking hands and promising revolution. At 2 p.m., I walked into the conference room for my transition meeting. Charles, Tyler, Steinberg, and the head of HR, Patricia Ung, were waiting. "Let's make this simple," Charles began without preamble. "Sign the patent transfer, take the $10 million, and leave quietly, or we fire you for cause, claim ownership anyway, and you spend the next decade in court while we use the technology." I placed my phone on the table, recording openly. "For cause, what cause?" "Sabotage," Tyler said. "We know you've been documenting things, planning something. That constitutes corporate espionage." "Documenting my own work is espionage." Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "Jenna, this doesn't have to be adversarial. The package we're offering is generous." "The package is insulting," I cut her off. "But it doesn't matter. The license expires tonight at 11:59 p.m. without renewal. Neurosphere ceases to function on Echelon's servers." "You're bluffing," Tyler snapped. "We've isolated the code. We don't need your permission." "You need my compiler, my libraries, my authentication keys." I stood up. "Gentlemen, lady, you have approximately 10 hours to either meet my licensing terms or watch Atlas fail spectacularly tomorrow." Charles slammed his hand on the table. "If you sabotage this launch..." "I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm simply choosing not to renew a license. That's not sabotage. That's business." I walked to the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Tyler, that pretty face you so casually dismissed. It's the same face that's about to watch your entire career implode on livestream tomorrow. I'd wish you luck, but we both know you'll need more than that." The war room they set up that night was visible from my office. Pizza boxes, energy drinks, and increasingly frantic engineers hunched over laptops. They were trying everything, cloning the system, building workarounds, even attempting to hack my authentication protocols. At 11:45 p.m., I sent a final email to Charles and the board. The Neurosphere license expires in 14 minutes. Renewal terms: $50 million annually, recognition of my IP ownership, and a public apology from Tyler Cole for his unprofessional conduct. You have until 11:59 p.m. to respond. At 11:58 p.m., my phone rang. Charles, desperate. $20 million for the patent, final offer. $50 million for the license, final counter. You're destroying hundreds of jobs. No, Mr. Cole, you are... The clock on my laptop hit 11:59 p.m. 12 a.m. In the Echelon building, every screen running Neurosphere went dark simultaneously, replaced by a simple message: license expired, please contact patent holder for renewal terms. The countdown was over. In 9 hours, the entire tech world would witness the consequences of underestimating a pretty face with a brilliant mind. The morning of the Atlas launch dawned crisp and clear in San Francisco. I watched the live stream from my apartment, coffee in hand, as tech journalists and investors filed into the Moscone Center. The venue was packed, 3,000 attendees in person, with millions more watching online. At 8:45 a.m., Tyler took the stage, confident and polished in his $2,000 suit. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the Atlas logo, a stylized neural network that I had actually designed 2 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, Tyler began, his voice echoing through the venue. Today, Echelon Dynamics changes the future of artificial intelligence forever. The audience applauded. I took another sip of coffee. Atlas isn't just an improvement on existing AI systems, Tyler continued. It's a complete reimagining of how machines think, learn, and evolve, and in just a few moments, you'll witness its capabilities firsthand. At 8:59 a.m., he gestured to the screen. Please, take out your phones and scan the QR code appearing now. You'll have direct access to Atlas, right from your devices. Experience the future. Live. The QR code appeared. Thousands of phones rose simultaneously, scanning eagerly. 9:01 a.m. The first confused murmurs began. 9:02 a.m. Connection failed messages started appearing on phones throughout the audience. 9:03 a.m. The main demonstration screen behind Tyler flickered, then displayed the message I'd programmed: license expired. Please contact patent holder for renewal terms. Tyler